TTB Music Podcast.
Okay, I think we're actually go.
Are we here?
I think we are. You would think after all this time I'd know how to work.
What you mean? The 8 years? 8 years we've been doing this.
Yeah, one for every listener. There's not a lot of lying in that stuff. No, we've lost a couple, like you, me.
Yeah. I don't listen to this anymore.
No.
I'm a medal to anyone that does.
Yeah.
Anyway, greetings.
Greetings, and welcome to November. Welcome to the Winterval.
The Winterval.
We don't say Christmas.
No, not yet.
So we're back, and as I think we said last time, we are doing a new albums from Robert Plant, St. Vincent, Wolf Alice, Shelby, Lynne, and Alison Mora, Courtney, Barnett, and Kurt Vile, and Squeeze. So we shall begin with the oldest person in the podcast, Robert Plant's 11th solo studio album, which is quite a difficult one. It means basically just this one actually has just Robert Plant in the title as opposed to Robert Plant and the
something,
which has had quite a few on, and obviously previously done a couple of country folky records with Alison Krauss and somebody whose name I've now forgotten, but never mind. Anyway, on to this particular album, Robert Plant, Carry Fire. Is it any good, Pete?
Yes, I knew you were going to ask me that. I am not. I was about to say I'm not familiar with Robert Plant's work, but you know what I mean. I honestly, I'm not that familiar with
this solo
oeuvre. Exactly. So reassuring to hear he's dabbled with country before. Yeah, this album's all right. It's for me. It passed the time, but it passed the time in a fruitful way. I enjoyed it more than I thought I would. When you presented me with said list and said, "Here, Robert Plant," I was like, "Really? Okay." Yeah, no, I enjoyed it much more than that. And in fact, I'd say the first half of the album it just sort of rattles along at quite a decent pace. It's a fairly upbeat album as well. I don't know why I thought it would be more ballad or somber driven, but it's not.
Yeah.
It's up tempo. Lyrically, it seems fairly up tempo as well. There's only sort of one sort of it kind of does slow down towards the end, and there is of course the duet towards the end as well with
Chrissy Hines.
Chrissy Hines, thank you. And there's I think it's the Carving Up the World Again, where I think it's a little bit politics by numbers, kinda. Which is a point I'm going to return to later.
The politics later in the podcast. Yes,
I might revisit that point. But all in all, it's a decent listener. It's a decent album. If you like country, great. If you like just a little bit of guitar-y rock, fine. What do you want? It's Robert Plant.
It is Robert Plant, and I think, as one might expect, with if you're at all familiar with his solo career and I suppose even his Led Zepp days, you've got that mixture of kind of folky bluesy rock merging with that kind of Indian, African, Middle Eastern influences.
It has that element,
that definitely comes through on a couple of the tracks particularly. I'm in agreement with you. I think the album starts really well. I think May Queen, New World, and Season Song particularly
very strong.
It's a really great start to the record. Similar like you, I kind of lose it a bit in the middle, but then I think it finishes strong as well. So from Keep It Hid, and then the Chrissy Hines duet, which I think is an old 50s tune, and then Heaven Sent at the end as well. So it's kind of that classic, really good start, middle, really good ending, ending for me. But overall, I think it's a you know what I'm saying.
It's a solid album.
It's a solid album.
It sags in the middle like most men his age.
Oh.
I'm including ourselves in that sort of. Anything upward of 40, mate.
Okay, moving swiftly on to the 5th studio album by St Vincent, otherwise known as Annie Clark, Masseduction. We didn't review her last album, although I was a big fan
You
of
were
it.
a big fan.
So I actually bought you a copy
You
of
actually
it.
bought me a copy of the album, and I listened to it instead of listening to whatever it was I was supposed to be listening to that January.
Yes.
A couple of years ago.
I think she's before I say what I think of the album. I think over the last few years she's been one of the more interesting recording artists around in a world, as they say in film trailers. In a world with lots of stuff that just sounds the same.
Yes.
It sounds produced the same as that. I think at least she tries to do things differently and tries to bring a mix of influences and styles into her music. And I think that has continued with this record when you've got that kind of influences of kind of Prince and Bowie and Talking Heads, and I'd also say bizarrely, or perhaps not bizarrely, the first track particularly, Hang On Me, starts, and I was just reminded really of kind of early Alanis Morissette in both the kind of delivery and the kind of tone of the song. And it's one of my favourite kind of albums in the fact that it's short. It's 40 minutes long, and I think it does quite a lot within its 40 minutes. So I said, musically, it kind of there are ebbs and flows, interesting kind of mixes of kind of highly synth-based stuff, and then a couple of kind of nice guitar-y bits, and some amusing lyrics as well. So this is I like this record. Probably not as much as I liked the previous one, but it made me smile, and it did what sadly very few albums do these days, which is I got through it without being bored at any point.
Yeah. And there are rewards on repeated listening as well. I particularly enjoyed the lyrics to Slow Disco. I mean, talking about comical lyrics.
Yeah.
I don't need to slow dance with you to tell you I love you or how I feel. Or, yeah. So I get the lyrics right. A very, very familiar review. I think I preferred this one though to the last one.
Okay.
So there you go. That's my Christmas ruined. It's interesting that you can have tracks like, as you say, sort of very up-tempo. I'm thinking Masseduction, Los Angeles, as well, and then you have Happy Birthday Johnny, which just could be dropped in from a different artist.
Yeah, one of my favourite tracks on the album.
Yeah, it's a really, really good track. But what I quite like about the pacing is it sort of brings it up, drops it down, brings it up, drops it down, and I think that really helps. And the fact it rattles along in 40 minutes is just, it's a bonus.
Yes.
No, I really enjoyed. I mean, for me, the influences were obviously more on the electro pop scale. I heard them all the artists that you've heard me quote over 8 years. They're all in there. I was going to throw Ladytron into the mix, but I think more musically rather than vocally, if that makes sense.
Yes.
It's a really interesting album. It's got innovation running through it. I don't know if you saw this. She was on Graham Norton the other night, and
no, I didn't see that,
she was carrying a sort of a lightweight guitar that she'd invented.
Okay. Yeah.
And I just thought, okay, there's obviously that fine line between really dedicated to the cause and perhaps a little bit pretentious.
Yes.
Now I had her on the dedicated to the cause line.
Yeah, so recent live gigs have divided critics quite starkly because it was literally just her backing track and guitar for the whole thing. So there were lots of people that thought it was still brilliant regardless. Yeah. But there were also critics and fans alike who felt shortchanged the fact that there wasn't actually a band playing the music, and it literally just was
Yes.
Standing on stage with the guitar and the huge backing track playing the whole tunes.
Yeah, and that's very much how she performed on TV. There was a definite the Robert Palmer sort of vibe, with the hair and the girls.
She does have that kind of vibe anyway.
Yeah, she does. Yeah. But anyway, that's by the by. As for this album, really enjoyed it. Really good.
So moving to the UK, and the second album by indie band Wolf Alice, Visions of Life. Their first album was very well received by the critics, and actually did quite well. I think sales-wise as well, it was quite good. Charted quite well in the UK as well. It fell in between our kind of reviewing.
Did it now?
Things. This one has got its timing right or timing wrong. We shall find out very shortly. So, Peter, Wolf Alice, is this one of those classic great British indie albums we've been waiting for, or just another? It's a British indie album.
The former.
Mm-hmm.
I really enjoyed this record. I listened to this one 3 or 4 times. I squeezed in an extra listen when I had time. For me, this it just, again, it's sort of classic indie but updated.
Yeah.
So very much in a sort of it operates in the same space as bands like Always and so on, although obviously sounds very different. And again, the electro pop's in there. You just gave me a little interesting fact before we came on, because I think there's a couple of tracks in particular, Don't Delete the Kisses, which I really enjoyed. It's kind of almost like a stream of, and it's not the only one because there's one that follows it shortly afterwards, sort of almost the lyrics delivered in a kind of stream of consciousness kind of way.
Yes.
Very reminiscent of very early 9 Inch Nails records, in that sort of kind of spoken word, these are my thoughts, these are my musings.
I hadn't thought about that.
Which was sort of that appealed to me, and actually very, says a man in his 40s, very relatable to what this 20-something is clearly going through. I remember being young, no, but yeah, it very much, it very much, and a girl, it very much captured that sort of what it's like to be young, what it's like to be in love, what it's like to be famous, and well, I didn't know about that, but what it's like to have all these things thrust upon you, and also what it's like to rock out. There's some, as well as the sort of deeper stuff, there was just some classic indie tunes on here as well with like loud guitars and such.
Indeed there are, yes.
So yeah, no, I really enjoyed this album.
I enjoyed it a bit less than you did, which is not to say that I didn't think it was an interesting record, because I agree with you that I think this does show, for anyone that's actually heard their debut album, this does show a growth in their sound and in their songwriting, because it isn't all, again, a bit in a way, I suppose, a bit like the previous album we just discussed. It has the advantage of not being a one-note record. It is very much, because you start off with that whole kind of dreamy kind of indie pop sound of Heavenward, and then you're going to go into the beautiful kind of punk indie rock of kind of Yuck Fu, which is just marvellous. And as you say, there are a couple of times when that happens, when you can go from one to the other. So I think in the middle of the album, Formidable Cool, one of my favourite tracks on the record, on the album,
it's good,
comes in, and that's just a classic slice of proper indie music. I liked it. I will probably give it some more listens to see if I end up liking it more than I do at the moment. I like it, but I like it kind of just in a kind of
You like it?
I like where they're going, and I like enough of it that I would certainly be interested in finding out where they go on album 3 already,
Absolutely.
even if I didn't listen to anything else.
Yeah.
Moving on to the first of our 2 duet albums, I suppose you could call them. This is Shelby, Lynne and Alison Moore, and Not Dark Yet. It seems weird saying this is their debut album, because you know, it might be the only album that they ever make, but it is an album that certainly fans of both and country fans in general have been hoping they would make for years. For those who don't know, they are sisters, and the album they've chosen to make Now Come Together is basically a covers record, produced by Teddy Thompson, and it's an interesting choice of covers they've decided to cover too. It has to be said. So we've got the Killers, Bob Dylan, who gives the album its song title, Townes Van Zandt, Jason Isbell, Merle Haggard, Nick Cave, Nirvana, and there's only one original track on the record, which is the final track. And I'd like to start with that one particularly because it's for anyone that knows the kind of history of the sisters in general, it's lyrically and musically the most interesting, because it's about that kind of identifying with how another member of your family or someone you're close to is feeling about things and shared experiences, and that kind of and the emotion that only someone that's shared that thing can understand. Because when they were young, in fact, I think Lynne was 17 and Maura was 14, their father shot their mother dead and then turned the gun on himself and committed suicide. So they've been kind of carrying that extra baggage over the years in their music as solo artists and stuff like that, and I think that comes through quite a lot in the Is It Too Much, the final track. I shouldn't say despite the fact that's quite gloomy. The album isn't actually that gloomy, even though it is very much a kind of a country record. In fact, so much so that, I mean, my list, which kicks the album off, the Killers song, which is on Sam's Town. Here you're thinking it's almost like it was written to be a kind of country music duet almost. Yeah. It just fits so perfectly into that kind of style of music and suits their voices very well. Elsewhere, some of it's a bit hit and miss, I have to say. I mean, I'm a fan of the album generally, but I think some of it works better than others. I like the cover of Not Dark Yet, which is one of my favourite Dylan songs. Also, Lungs by Townes Van Zandt's always been a favourite song of mine. It's a good version of that. The cover of Nick Cave's In My Arms is good. Less sold on their cover of Lithium, it has to be said, which I think kind of seemingly falls between indecision to either kind of go full rocky with it, or to really strip it out and just do it totally acoustic. They seems to have decided, along with Teddy Thompson, to kind of go for somewhere in between, and for me doesn't quite work. But overall, again, it's another short album, rattles along. If you're a fan of either artist or both artists, which I am anyway, because I happen to think both of them have got terrific voices, then it's a solid album of covers.
Yeah, I agree with much of what you said. I did find it hit and miss, to be honest, and in that way I could never really, even after 2 or 3 listens, I could never really sort of really get under the skin of it. I mean, beginning with that last track again, I actually think that's the strongest one on here. And it's quite telling, I suppose, that, you know, obviously with the songwriting talent and a decision to do an album almost of covers, that actually the one song they've written is probably the best song on the album, in my opinion. Where it perhaps differ from you is I actually quite like the cover of Lithium.
I don't dislike it. I just think that it could have been. Yes,
I know.
Could have done more with it.
I know. Yeah, and obviously Into My Arms, which precedes that as well, is good. So it kind of converse to most of our reviews, this album ends really well for me. I wasn't familiar with the Jason Isbell song, but there it is.
Yeah, I think it's one that him and his wife wrote for I think a British documentary actually.
Okay.
But then, so I don't think it ever made it onto any album.
Cool. Yeah, and as you say, it starts fine with the Killers, and you're absolutely right. That felt very natural as a country sort of song. So yeah, there you go. That's my review.
Okay, moving on to another partnership, Australian Courtney again, this is an interesting one. Not sure how they came to come about, but both of their Vile's previous album was very well critically received, as was Barnett's, and I think actually she was nominated for International Brit in 2016 for her debut album. But anyway, they've come together to make an album which, as far as I was reading, is essentially a mixture of stuff that they've written for this project, with also some songs from their previous albums that they've decided to rework for this album, and then there's a cover at the end, as seems fitting. So, does this work, Pete?
Yes. Yes, I thought this worked much better than the previous album. No, it works for me fine. Particularly, I was intrigued to learn, obviously, that they kind of this album contains covers within covers, in that they cover each other's tracks at some point as well. So that's quite cool. I particularly like her version of Peeping Tom by him.
Yes, which is brilliant.
Yeah, I thought that was really good. No, this for me is yeah. I actually, this one doesn't start well for me at all.
Really?
Yeah, no, it kind of feels like, you know, again, it feels very much like they're sort of establishing that relationship in the studio. Now, you might like that because you might like the insight and how that all fits together. For me, this album I thought grew as it went on, and I found that it just felt more settled, and they obviously worked really well together. But I found that got better as the album went forward. So for me, it was a bit of a shaky start, but then it sort of grew and grew and grew, and it obviously ends brilliantly.
Yes, a very good belly cover at the end.
Yes.
I love this record.
Yeah.
This was the surprise of the podcast for me by.
I agree with that.
A long way. I even from first listen, I was hooked on this. The kind of combination of their voices, which her voices reminded me a lot of early Liz Phair, and his reminded me of a guy whose name I can't remember, but it was the lead singer of a band called Green on Red back in the 80s. And so they're both, in a way, neither of them are what you would call classically great singers.
No.
However, the combination of their voices works really well in this kind of lo-fi-ish indie-ish thing. I think it starts great as well. Over Everything and Let It Go. I mean, what I like about those first two tracks that makes it quite funny for me is the fact that both songs are kind of about, they're both sort of conversations with each other about how you write songs.
Yes.
And how they go about writing. And there was a lot in there that was, I thought, quite funny as well as musically enjoyable. And then actually the third track on the album, which is a song written by, I believe, her wife, is possibly my favourite track on the album, Fear is Like a Forest, which has been, again, growing on me and growing with more heard it. Yeah. I agree also with you that the cover of Peeping, the cover, if you call it that, her taking the lead on Peeping Tom is genius, frankly, and followed by Untogether, the belly cover at the end, means that once again, actually, we've had bizarrely, I have to say, we've pretty much had a month of well-ending records.
Yes.
Well, I would say we have one to go then. But yeah, so overall, I really liked and rated this record, and it has made me certainly more interested to go and check out the back catalogues of both artists.
Yeah, of course.
So yeah, big thumbs up from me.
Wow.
So we finish with South East London's finest. Hello to Neil. Hope you're feeling better. Squeeze, The Knowledge, 15th studio album.
Yes. They have a very ardent fan base, as you know, and And just so you know, before I ask you for your review, Neil does have the proverbial boycott of the podcast threatening this review. So I just like to put that out in front.
I thought he said it was rubbish.
Now I'll tell you. I'll give you his review when we're done. So what did you think?
This is really weird. I put this album on a couple of weeks ago, and we got to the end of the opening track, "Innocence is Paradise," and I was sat there thinking, "Christ, that was dull." and that kind of like stuck with me for the whole of the first listen, and I was kind of fighting this album on first listen, I have to confess. So you know there's a but coming here.
Yeah.
And there is a but coming here, because I have to say the opening track, "Innocence is Paradise," is by far my favourite track on the album, and and is currently ranking up there as one of my favourite tracks of the year at the moment.
Yeah.
Repeated listens clearly make the album better, and you kind of get more into it. It is like what you expect from Difford and Tilbrook, I suppose. Chris Difford's lyrics have always been one of the driving forces behind the band, humour and insightfulness and stuff like that. So you have songs on this album called A&E, which is about the NHS, supporting the NHS. Rough Ride, which is about growing up in London and how your kids can't afford to the stuff you could have, being afford a house, all that kind of stuff. There's all the kind of social comment stuff, and even Final Score, which is talking about child abuse. All three of those songs, particularly lyrically, verge almost on Manic Street preachery, and going just too over the top to kind of get their point without being too preachery. I think they just about stay on the right side, but it's closer than I would have expected from the band, really. That said, they are quite funny. Not as funny as Please Be Upstanding, obviously, which deals with erectile dysfunction, just to prove that the humour's still there. And there's also this lovely moments in the album as well. I mean, I see it's Rough Ride, isn't it, where you've got the Lewisham and Greenwich NHS choir singing on that, and there's some kind of opera type stuff going on there as well, which is quite interesting. And also, I think it's I'm not sure which track it is, but one of the tracks near the end might be Albatross or Elmer's End, gives a nod to Lewisham as well. And is it Departure Lounge, which I think might possibly be a future single, which has a certain Bowie-ness to it, particularly as it goes on. So I think overall, certainly not the best Squeeze album ever, but considering the history and where they are, actually a pretty decent effort.
Yeah. Very good. I'll take that. I don't know if Neil will. Maybe I'll say some kind things. So I actually enjoyed this more than I thought I would on first listen, and actually on second listen enjoyed it further. Completely agree with what you said around some of the more political stuff. It's all fine and good, and of course there are things right now in the world that need to be said, and they're all credit to them, they're saying them. But actually this album was stronger when it was dealing with more of the humour and dealing with more of the upbeat commentary, rather than going too down the political by numbers, as I said at the start of the podcast.
Well, except for Patchouli, which is crap.
But I quite like Patchouli.
Really?
Yeah, I like Patchouli.
Oh, yeah.
See, for me, I agree with you. Innocence in Paradise was a bit meh on the first listen. So actually, a Patchouli sort of dragged me in a way. So I don't mind silliness like that. What is quite interesting is, as I say, the ardent fan base have quite split over this apparently, and I think traditionally, obviously Glenn Tilbrook has sort of mastered the music and the presentation of the band and differed the lyrics.
Yes.
But I think the fans see this was more of a Tilbrook album, sort of creeping in. So I'm not going to pass that off as my own knowledge. That's thank you, Neil. So I think that's probably where more of the political stuff is coming from as well. So that's kind of left to a split in the fan base. That said, Neil loves it, and I hope my brother-in-law is feeling better. And I hope he's still listening after that.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. So no, I enjoyed overall.
He's been fast forwarding.
Overall, really enjoyed that more than I thought I would.
Yeah, I
it's a good
agree.
album.
I was concerned that it might be a bit, but actually, overall, it's pretty solid. Pretty solid in a good way.
Solid in a good way. The good solid.
Yeah. Thumbs up solid.
The thumbs up solid. We've established that this year.
Yeah,
we can do
absolutely.
that. Yeah.
The Courtney Barnett, Kurt Vile album.
Is that your favourite?
Probably is because of the surprise.
Ta-da.
But yeah, so although the St Vincent album will probably be also there.
I'd say both of those are popping, but for me, I think Wolf Alice just takes it. Just nicks it there.
Right, that's the end of another one. We'll be back at some point.
Yeah.
Depending when.
When I've sold this bloody house.
Yeah. Yeah, we could be recording the Christmas podcast in January. That, despite the fact we still had to get another podcast in before then.
Well,
I
think last time I appealed for someone to buy my house. Now I'm just appealing for someone to work with me to speed things up.
Yep. So if we have time, next time we will try and do the Battle of the Gallaghers.
Yep.
Liam versus Noel, and maybe Miss Swift's latest record, which is due out in the next couple of weeks.
Gosh.
And then also try and catch up with a handful of albums that have been critically praised this year that we totally ignored. Just so we can go, oh yeah, listen to those.
Awesome.
Anyway, until then.
Riveting. I'll see you then.